breaks with, or after rather, Barnabas and who was the other one who went up to Jerusalem to complain? Mark, John Mark. After Paul breaks with Barnabas and Mark, and Paul says, I won't take this Mark with me on my travels anymore because he deserted our work in Pamphylia. If you know that passage, then it starts in the New document. You say, what's Eisenman talking about? Well, that's all in the book of Acts. Then it starts to become a narrative, and it changes tone. All the miraculous material drops out, you know, all of the sort of supernatural things, and it just becomes a prosaic, we went here, we did this, we went here, we did this, we stopped here, we stopped there, we were afraid of this, we passed by this, we went up to here, we came back, and so on and so forth. Then Paul's arrest and some really interesting material about interviews, 5 chapters of interviews from about Acts 23 to Acts 28 or so, I don't have it right in front of me, of interviews with Roman governors and Herodian kings and queens with whom he's on extremely intimate and congenial terms. They seem to like him, and he gets along with them, and he talks to them regularly, and they have a very good time with each other in terms of conviviality. Now, I have to submit, to me, that's very illustrative, because I can't think of the historical Jesus sitting on good terms with the Roman governor and the Herodian kings. You know, the historical Jesus, at the very least, seems to been very leery and kept his mouth closed in their presence, and wasn't all chatty with them the way Paul is, and which shows me the difference between Paul and Jesus right off, in terms of figures, and in terms of approach, and in terms of what he's up to and where he's after. So those materials in the We document, which include a last confrontation with James in chapter 21, and there it's made very clear that, again, James is the leader of the early church, and it's not the other James. That James is already gone. James, the brother of John, is supposedly departed way back in chapter 13 or so. I forget what chapter, but earlier. And this James is not introduced who he is, but it's clear that James is the one who makes his rulings and tells Paul what he can or cannot do. So once again, even the second part of Acts makes it clear that James is the leader of the early church. Now, I know those who are church members would not like that, and therefore we have a problem right there, the way a Muslim would react to what you say about their violence. You have to decide if that's a reasonable deduction from the material. And that's where the word reasonable comes in. So to go back to the original point, most reasonable people think the writings of Paul predate these other sources. The book of Acts is possibly primary in the we area, but secondary to Paul in the other areas. And then the Gospels are all considered secondary to Paul by very objective-minded people who are not under some constraint of some kind, that is faith-wise. You have to understand, if you're a minister, a rabbi, an imam, if you're a priest, if you're a church member of some kind, there is, even if you think you're independent-minded, some subtle pressure to conform to the ideology of that group which you represent. It's almost impossible for a person to escape that. Because that's where your allegiance is, and I hate to say it, that's where usually your salary is coming from. You know, I can't condemn the university system as a member of the university system. I have to support it. I believe it. I wouldn't be here if I didn't. My salary comes from the state of California, the university system. I think the university system is above all other systems. Because I think people are supposed to be exercise their free mind there. So I have a prejudice in favor of Descartes and Newton and people who created the university system. Everyone else probably has a prejudice too. So you, the student, have to decide now, when you weigh someone's view, is that person under constraint? And I think a lot of people you'll find are under constraint. And I may be under constraint too. You'll have to decide if you're under constraint, if that person, if they're under constraint, then it's not a totally free view or an evaluation of the evidence before us. Okay, that's enough of that. So let's now go back to where we left off so we can get up to the historical Jesus. So we're talking about Jewish history. The reason I read you those materials on the church materials the other day was because actually I had them with me, and therefore I thought they would be interesting to present to you. But we want to go back before them. We came to the present situation. So we were talking about Jewish history down to the time of Alexander the Great. We came to the first Babylonian captivity, and the first Babylonian captivity, if you recall, was approximately 585 to 540 something or other. Somewhere in there, BC. That's the end of the southern kingdom of Judea. When did the northern kingdom end? 7-something. 722. You're right. You're on. And who put an end to it?
The Assyrians.
The Assyrians. Okay, good. So that left the Israel thing in question. Who were the northerners after that? Were they just, as the New Testament sees them, Samaritans? Or as the southerners see the Samaritans, a mixed group of settlers and other persons who had come in there later and may be authentic, but may not be authentic. The Samaritans, even today, there are some Samaritans left, as I told you, see themselves as authentic and have their own Old Testament. How many books in the Samaritan Old Testament? Today, there's about 500 Samaritans left. Most of them live in Tel Aviv, but in any case, they're there. Some in Nablus. Why would they live in Nablus? What did I tell you Nablus was? Nablus is the Arabic for Neapolis. Neo means new. Polis means city. What's it the new city on top of? The destroyed city of the old Samaritan or the old northern kingdom capital of Shechem. But that wasn't really the capital of Shechem. That was the city Jacob founded in the Old Testament, if you recall. Here's Palestine, okay. Israel, whatever you want to call it. Jerusalem here. Bethel, which is this northern shrine here. Shechem here.